What's up, everybody? The end of another trial, and we're still hanging out here together. Yes, my voice is going. It's been a full day of traveling, hanging out with some buddies. I'm on a trip for the rest of the weekend, gonna have some fun, but I was watching the closing arguments on the plane ride, and we have some real thoughts and things to discuss in these closing arguments. And I told you when we talked last time, the most difficult part of any trial is explaining non-economic damages to a jury. Getting a jury to feel what your client feels and try to understand what your client has gone through and is going through. And this was a very, very, very poor example of how to do that. And I think it's really, really unfortunate, but it seems as if they did not believe in their client's case at the end. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but that is a bit of what it felt like. And I will tell you, and I tweeted out right when I got off the plane, I tweeted out after those closing arguments, I heard there's a verdict. I feel very confidently it's going to be a verdict for Gwyneth Paltrow. That's how I felt for the last couple of days, trying to hold out hope, trying to still, talk through it with you guys and see what you all think. That's why we did the damage discussion if Terry Sanderson wins, because I didn't think they were going to be able to really put a compelling argument together. And I think that the absolute nuke of a finishing cross-examination that Owens did with Terry Sanderson at the end of the day yesterday is literally worst case scenario for a plaintiff, worst case scenario for a plaintiff's attorney. You're trying to act like the lights went out. I loved that line by James in closing. The lights went out after this accident. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to a piece of Terry Sanderson is still on that slope, still on that hill, and how they overreached. We literally talk about this stuff. So plaintiffs' lawyers talk about this stuff, and some plaintiffs' lawyers are like, oh, you always swing for the fences. You always ask for $5 million. I'm like, honestly, I just don't feel that way. And I've talked through with the other lawyers that try cases in my office, and we're all on the same page that you ask for what's reasonable, what you believe the case is actually worth. Full damages. You don't want to undercut what your client has been through. Somebody said, do you yell for a living? I do speak for a living all day. And then when trials are going on like this that I'm covering, I'm then speaking for an extra hour and a half every day. I happen to be with some of the boys today, so we're hanging out and, get a little loud and, laughing and joking. So it went fast today, but it's okay. Feeling okay. So we are going to get to those closings, but I do want to start with the verdict. I want to start with how the verdict went, and then we can kind of play Monday morning quarterback going through the closings. Now, I did make these notes while watching closing before I knew what the verdict was, but I do think the main issue in this case was them just reaching for too much money, exaggerating the, and that's a great question. We are going to talk about this. How do they come up with $33 a day? We're going to absolutely talk about that. And I see listen to learn, same thing. We are going to go through all that. We really are. All right, but let's start out. And I kind of have a cool setup here in this room, in this Airbnb. I've got this like big TV screen behind me. That's kind of like a secondary screen that John set up. So if I look over here, I'm just looking at that secondary screen. So let's watch the verdict together, this video, to kind of get us in to, which one is it? This is the one here. All right. So let's watch this together to kind of get us into the flow of how the day ended, what everybody's been waiting for, and then some discussion about maybe what was said by Gwyneth Paltrow to Terry Sanderson as she walked out.
With their attorneys. Would the foreperson that the jury has selected please stand and state your number?
Number 19.
Thank you. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yeah.
Will you please hand it to the bailiff, and the bailiff will bring it to me? Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. We'll now have the clerk read the verdict. You can just read the question and the answer.
Was Gwyneth Paltrow at fault? No. Was Gwyneth Paltrow's fault a
It's over right there. And Just Ginge has the question, was anybody surprised by this verdict? Let me know in the comments if you were surprised. So it's over when you hear this number, or when you hear this first question. When they said no, that Gwyneth Paltrow was not at fault, you immediately know a few things. Number one, she's not paying any money if she's not at fault. Number two, she is going to have a 0% next to her name. And number three, Terry Sanderson cannot win. Now, we don't know if Terry Sanderson is going to be found to be at fault. Because as Steve Owens argued in his closing, both parties in skiing, it's a funny sport or hobby. It's inherently dangerous. Anybody could die. So both parties could actually not be at fault and have 0% next to their name. That is possible. So that's why we're going to keep listening to the rest of the verdict. The clerk is a little surprised when she reads the next one, like, what is there supposed to be an answer here? The judge is like, no, they leave that one blank.
cause of Terry Sanderson's harm?
It's blank, which is no, she's not the cause of his harm, but she's not the cause of the action.
There's just no response there.
Okay. Was Terry Sanderson at fault? Yes. Was Terry Sanderson's fault a cause Gwyneth Paltrow's? Did Terry Sanderson's fault cause Gwyneth Paltrow's harm? Yes.
So now we know Terry Sanderson is at fault and he caused her damages. So what does that mean? If she's not at fault and he is at fault, well, now we know what the percentages are going to be. The person that's not at fault is going to have 0% by their name. The person that is at fault is going to have 100% next to their name.
Comparative fault. What percent of the fault do you assign to Terry Sanderson? 100%. Damages. What amount fairly compensates Gwyneth Paltrow for economic damages? $1. Signed March 30th, 2023.
Thank you.
And I will also tell you, they absolutely prepared him for this. They absolutely told him, listen, there's a realistic possibility we lose outright. So be ready. Don't react. Don't lose your mind. Nothing like that. Still console him. It still is a kick to the stomach. Literally, in a case like this where it's he said, she said, you say there's one version of events, she says there's another, and they say you're 100% at fault and wrong, they are literally looking you in the eye, calling you a liar. It's hard to take that. I don't believe you. I've got a buddy, I think I already told you this, who said he likes to do that sometimes when he thinks somebody's lying, is look them right in the eye and be like, I don't believe you, and see how they react. So that's the feeling he's got right now.
So to juror number 19, the foreperson, is this your verdict?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And the attorneys have asked that I poll the jury, and so I need to ask each one of you if this is your verdict. This is not an unusual thing to happen. It happens quite often. So number 16, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Number 11, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 8, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 2, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
I've already covered number 19. Number 28, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 29, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
And number 32, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. So to the attorneys, is there anything further before I discharge the jury?
Nothing for the plaintiff. Your Honor.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank you to the jury.
let me just read you the last jury instruction. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this trial is finished. Thank you for your service. The American system of justice relies on your time and your sound judgment, and you have been generous with both. You served justice by your fair and impartial decision. I hope you found the experience rewarding. You may now talk about this case with anyone you like. You may be contacted by the press or by the lawyers. You do not have to talk to them or with anyone else, but you may. The choice is entirely yours. I turn now to the lawyers and to the press and ask them to honor your wishes if you say that you do not want to talk about the case. If you do decide to talk about the case, please respect the privacy of your fellow jurors. The confidences that they may have shared with you while deliberating are not yours to share with others.
That's interesting. I like that instruction. And again, he says, listen, if you don't want to talk to him, then the press better obey your wishes there.
Again, thank you for your service. You may now retire. And if everybody else would please remain here, we've got some things to do.
All rise to the jury.
So we're going to watch her walk out, and then we're going to talk about what is reportedly what she said to him when she walked out.
May be seated. So I've got a few things I'm going to do with the parties, and then I'm going to ask everyone who's still in the courtroom at that point to remain seated while the parties leave. So anyone who wants to be outside when the parties leave, please do that now. So Mr. Owens, I'm looking to you to prepare a judgment on the jury verdict.
Perfect.
Will you do that?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Sykes, is there anything further for the court before the court adjourns?
No, my client just wants to say thank you to Your Honor for the effort you made too. Okay? That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Owens, is there anything further from the defense before the court adjourns?
No, thank you, Judge, and to all your staff and the bailiffs.
Let me just comment that I appreciate the professionalism that all the attorneys have shown and the parties, so thank you.
It's very common
court is
for judges to do that after trials. Just FYI.
Now adjourned. Thank
Gonna
you.
let my client slip out before.
Yes, everyone remain seated while the parties leave.
I'm going to make a quick statement. Ms. Paltrow is not going to be making a statement today.
So you can make the statement outside, Mr. Owens.
I will.
Okay, so she slips out, mentions something, and Ann Vibe said, TS said in a presser after that GP said, I wish you well when she walked by. She has been very gracious, in my opinion, and seemed so emotional at the verdict. And he said, thank you, is also what was reported. So that's what that interaction was as she slipped by. Okay, so that's the verdict. Doesn't seem like too many people were surprised. And that comment that was made, that's basically what all the reports are saying. I have not seen the presser. We will probably cover that a different day, like next week maybe. I'm not going to do a live tomorrow, but I did record a video yesterday about Judge Newman from the Murdoch case and an interview with him. So that's posting tomorrow. A lot of you sent it to me on Instagram and Twitter at Tragos Law if you want to give me a follow on there. Oh, I forgot to say, like the video if you haven't already, hit that like button. And I was hoping to hit 215,000 subscribers by the end of this trial. We're at 214. There's over 6,000 people in the chat. So if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so we can get up to 215,000 before the night ends. Be that 215,000th subscriber. All right. So that's the verdict. Paltrow wins. Not a big surprise to me. Not a big surprise to many of you. But we are going to now get to the closing arguments. We're going to look at what happened. We're going to look at how we got here. And we're going to discuss how you ask for damages, what sometimes it looks like and how it doesn't always look like this. And then what I think the best parts of the defense closing arguments were, now that we know that they won the case, obviously, what did they hold on to? And a lot of you also posted on Twitter, the worst part about Paltrow winning is that Owens is going to think he crushed. Owens is going to think he did a good job. Listen, lawyers know. I will tell you, trial lawyers know. Winning or losing a case does not just come down to our skill. We don't always win when we do the best job. We don't always lose when we do the worst job. Okay. So many other things come into play when you talk about trying a case. I will tell you right now, I think Owens already thought he's a really good trial lawyer. And I don't think if he lost this case, he was going to think that he wasn't a good trial lawyer. And I think some things he did really well, some things he didn't do so well. And so that's, I think, what it really comes down to is the case. And they believed Gwyneth Paltrow. They didn't believe Terry Sanderson. That's what I think it came down to. All right. Somebody's gifting memberships, which is awesome and so nice. Thank you for that. Yes, I'm sure he's lost some. I'm sure he's lost some. Every lawyer has lost some. Okay, so let's get to the closings. Actually, before we get to the closings, let's get to the directed verdict arguments, because you guys really like this discussion that happens when they talk about asking for directed verdicts. And the plaintiff asked for directed verdicts, and they asked for it on the claim of attorney's fees. And Owens had a few good quotes today. One of them was, "You can't handcuff me and then slap me," because the female attorney for, I think her name's Kristen, for Sanderson said they didn't argue anything that shows bad faith. This was a good faith claim that was made. Experts backed it up. People that are totally independent, like Ramon, gave his recollection. He was a witness. It wasn't just Terry Sanderson. And so this was a good faith claim. Okay. That's a totally separate argument. The judge said, I'm going to save that for another time. Okay. So there's nothing really on that. But when we get to, and that was just a total waste of time, basically. When we get to the spoliation motion, a lot of you had questions about this. And the judge said that they are allowed to make the argument that Terry Sanderson had a GoPro and deleted it because it had something bad on it. The jury could accept that argument or reject that argument. Terry Sanderson's lawyers didn't like that, didn't want that for obvious reasons. Judge allowed it in. Okay. The most interesting one to me, I think I tweeted about this. So many of you guys are like, are you okay? You haven't been tweeting today. I was like, yeah, I was traveling. I do want to reach 250K. Wait, what happened? I do want to reach 250K. I'm not delusional. 215K by the end of this trial, which was today. 250K, obviously a goal. I mean, whatever we hit, it's fun, whatever, not a big deal. Yeah, my screen, my camera shaky because it's on my laptop. So when I move this thing that it's on, if you could see what it was on, I guess I could show you, right? So like this is the TV screen as my second screen, and it's on this little thing on top of a leg stand. So that's what I'm dealing with here, okay? So that's why it's a little shaky. Hey, we try to make it work. We figured you guys would want to hang out tonight, so we're hanging out tonight. We're making do with what we got. I don't have my full setup here. Okay, sorry, sidetrack. So I tweeted about this, and it was really interesting because the life expectancy, the mortality tables, how long is he supposed to live? And when we talk about mortality tables, I have never not gotten one in for demonstrative purposes to argue to the jury how long someone's going to live. And what's great about the mortality tables is they take into account people that are very healthy and people that are very sickly, people that have no comorbidities, people that do have comorbidities. As you live longer, your life expectancy usually goes up. Some places life expectancy is 76 years old, but once you hit that, it goes up. Obviously, they're not going to expect you to die a year ago, right? So I was shocked that they didn't get it in. And I couldn't really tell if the judge said no or if they just agreed they would make an argument. And the Owens, again, was real quick to stipulate, we'll stipulate to 5 years left for Terry's life if you want to do that. And the plaintiff was like, no. So they just ended up arguing it both ways, and they didn't get it in, and I was pretty surprised about that. So we started with Dr. Boehm. He testified, again, basically that his calculation was correct. The other guy's was wrong. It was very convincing. I told you about this. Listen, every expert's going to be like, no, I did it right. No, they did it right. No, I did it right. No, they did it right. Okay. And then on cross, same thing. It's like, well, he actually used your calculation for time and argued that their expert actually got it right. There you go. Some jury instructions I was going to go over, but I don't think I need to go over in a ton. If you guys have questions, I can talk about them during the Q&A portion. They can't exceed $1. But then we get to the plaintiff's actual closing. And in the plaintiff's closing, they basically say they think that Gwyneth Paltrow is sincere in what she thinks, but it's just wrong. Both lawyers, in my opinion, gave way too much personal testimony about their own life. We had I was milking cows by the old country lawyer. We had, I witnessed a car accident. I saw the guy run the red light, but he said he didn't run the red light. It's like, what are you saying? So people can be wrong. Yeah, I get it. This was a cover-up. He broke his ribs. That's how it proves he's the downhill skier, repeating some of the expert testimony. And talked about 5 to 20% of concussions are permanent. He was never diagnosed with dementia. NPH was asymptomatic. And this is where he said, part of Terry never came home from that ski trip. Part of Terry is still on that mountain. That's way too far. The dude is not dead. Come on. Come on. Then Lawrence jumps into close, starts talking about damages. And this is the first part we're going to play. And really, I just want you to watch Gwyneth Paltrow's reaction to these statements made by Mr. Lawrence.
No. So then you go to 5 below. And since 1 is yes, this is like a puzzle. Here, I got a pen. I've got one. So was Terry Sanderson at fault? I'll go back to the first page. Was Gwyneth Paltrow at fault? Yes. Oh, I forgot to do number 2. And you have to go in order. Was Miss Paltrow's fault the cause of Terry Sanderson's harm? It clearly is. Terry Sanderson was hit from behind. There was a scream.
Do you see her shaking her head no? Okay, that's not it. But we see her shaking her head no as he says that. And keep watching Gwyneth Paltrow. She's over here to the right of my screen.
He was hit from behind. So the answer is yes. So then we go to 3.
Shaking her head some more.
Because we answer number 0. And to be honest with you, this is the first time I've seen the form because it was just finalized just before we started the. So I have to think about this one a little bit, but let's think about it together. What percent of fault do you assign to Gwyneth Paltrow if you're?
It's so embarrassing. Like, you can't admit that. And this is why you need to have this stuff done earlier. I realize it's kind of out of his control, but I would have pushed to have this done earlier so that I can prepare for my closing. I always push to have the verdict forms finalized before I prepare for my closing so that this does not happen. Now, the rebuttal witness while he was on vacation and the technical difficulties, also kind of embarrassing, but sometimes that happens and it was worth it to get him to testify.
If your answer either 1 or 2 is no, then enter 0. Well, both are yes. So we have to, because Terry Sanderson did not cause this crash. You can't cause a crash when you're hit from behind.
Take a look at Gwyneth Paltrow. You can't cause a crash when you're hit from behind. She's like, duh. So I thought that was interesting. She was not trying to hide it from the jury. And if the other side saw this, usually I'd be like, Judge, can the parties not react like that during closing or during testimony? Sorry, I've been told not to touch. I'm pulling a Steve Owens. John has told me not to touch the poof while I use my mouse. So I apologize for shaking the camera. All right. So I just thought that was interesting. Then we get to damages, okay? And there are different ways to try to get a jury in the mindset of what the damages are going to be in this case. Terry was reacting to, I'm sure. I'm not just saying Gwyneth was the only one reacting. But to give them a context of the value of these damages, he says, you know, there are some paintings hanging on the wall that are 20, 50, $100 million. There are houses out there on that mountain that are 10, $20 million. I'm like, what? That's how you're doing it? That's how you're putting them in this mindset? Not great. Not great. And then he gets into, and I will just tell you, this is a very common, I know there's some questions here, so let's try to do this tonight and actually use the questions as I'm getting to the parts. Yeah. So Pi Z O code, $33 an hour, 16 hours a day, 365 years, 17 years equals 3.3 million. This is the basic calculation he came up with. Okay. So how do we get here? How do we get to these damages? Well, we call these per diem damages. It is a very common way to calculate and argue damages in a personal injury case like this. And it makes sense if you think about it and if you can explain it properly. And we'll talk about how he explained it, and then we'll talk about how I think is a better way to explain it. Some people don't get it. And listen, if you think Gwyneth Paltrow is going to win, this jury would not have cared if he gave the perfect presentation of damages. They thought Gwyneth Paltrow was not at fault, period. But this is how you get there, okay? You talk about how many hours in a day, and you can say he's awake for 16 hours. We almost never say that somebody is suffering these damages every minute of every day, especially when there are pictures of them saying, I'm feeling great, I'm having fun, I'm smiling, whatever it may be. Usually the medical records will tie 50% of the time I'm in pain, or I'm at a 2 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or whatever it may be. And you can usually tie that to timing, right? So if they say 50% of the time they're in pain, well, that 16 hours now becomes 8 hours, okay? Fair. At least we have a reason as to how we got to 8 hours. Half of the hours he's awake a day, okay? Then there are 365 days in a year, 17 years. He's correct with those numbers. But how do you equate that? How do you get from point A to point Z? And the way is you talk about, if you're going to use $33 an hour or make up a number like that, the way you get there is, let's talk about a job, okay? If there was a job ad out there and it said minimum wage, and that job was to spin a sign out front of a restaurant. Okay, doesn't sound that bad. Some people might take that job. But what if the job was to not be able to laugh, to not be able to cough, to not be able to pick up your grandkids, to not be able to sleep, to sit in a chair? That's what I would have started with, the rib injury. And that lasted about 6 months. So I'd do, for sure, 16 hours a day for 6 months. however many days that is. Would anyone take that job for minimum wage? No way. No way. What about for $100 an hour? No way. But let's just say $100 an hour for 6 months. And whatever that number comes out to be, that's for the pain and suffering for the rib injury. Then we get to the concussion. Now, I would do it much differently. I would not have it extrapolated out for the rest of his life as a permanent injury that he was just not. He didn't travel within the first few months, as according to his girlfriend, when he had the actual rib fractures that were healing. I see people saying that. But the brain injury is a little harder to get, right? But I think you can explain the scrambling, the executive function loss, the issues with family members, the loss of relationship. I think you can explain that in a way, and you can compare, minimum wage. Is that worth it? And you can make the calculations like that. But you can also say he made $500 an hour as an optometrist. I have no idea what it is, whatever it is. And you can say that's what his time was worth when he was helping people. And now no amount of help can fix Terry Sanderson. So that's the amount for this. And you use the calculation, but you actually build it around something, or say, let's just ask for half of that, or just 4 hours, to where the calculation comes up to what you think is fair. But you can't just make up a number. And we're going to listen to him do that here, because it was really not great, in my opinion, how he tried to explain these damages. But it's worth listening to and hearing how just unconvincing it was. Didn't sound like he was even convincing himself.
He's got this issue that where a big part of him was left up on that bandana ski run. So you have the power here. This is, before we were just arguing and presenting evidence, and the judge was ruling on it. But now the judge is going to pass the case to you. And this is where you decide what happens next. So I'm going to suggest, I'm not going to ask, this is not a, Terry asked me several years ago when I first learned of his case, well, what do you think it's worth? I said, well, Terry, could you?
So that's also a great point right there. They both lawyers talked about what their clients said to them, which, again, I don't think is appropriate. Are you waiving attorney-client privilege? It's facts, not in evidence. There was nobody that testified that Terry asked his lawyers what the case is worth. But then it makes me think this was the lawyer's response, that the lawyers thought the case was worth this much, which is even wilder to me. But that was an interesting tidbit.
If you could turn the earth backwards like Superman, go back in time, and how much would Terry take to not have what he has now? And he says, I'd rather go back in time and never have this.
Obviously,
so how do we calculate this? Well, I'm going to suggest a number. And this is just a suggestion that we do it with 16 hours a day. About the formulas, Dr. Bain and Dr. Scher gave you a lot of formulas, but hopefully these will be simpler than all those. So that's 16 hours a day. Times 365 days a year. Then the next question is the years. Well, it's been 7 years since the crash. Terry's likely to live another 10 years. Probably, we hope longer, much longer. He wants to live at 130.
What that tells me as a lawyer is you don't know or believe what you're saying. You don't say, we think Terry's going to live 10 years. We hope more. No, you say research and statistics say, statistically speaking, Terry is supposed to live 10 more years. That's what you say. It's not your thought. It's not what you want. It's not what Terry wants. We're in court. This is where I think more professionalism and a little more buttoned up style can actually work better, because it takes your opinion and your feelings out of it, and you're just proving something. You're putting some science behind your non-economic damages, and you should use that as a tool. not make it seem like, we hope he lives 10 years. And then you like automatically backtrack and like qualify it because you know it sounds weird.
But, at least 10 years. So 7 years since the crash, 10 years, that's 17 years. So we're going to times the next number, 17. Then the question is, how much is, not the price, there's no price that you can give for Terry's time, but what is the value that's been taken away from Terry? What is the value? I mean,
Does anybody think that they could understand that statement just like in a vacuum? What is the value of what's been taken from Terry? Nobody can really define that, especially as a layperson that's never thought about it before. Let's just assume these jurors have never tried to think about this before. In mock trial in law school, a big problem, I think, is they never do damages arguments. We always just do liability, and I understand why. But I think there should be maybe even a separate mock trial or some class, how to argue damages, especially non-economic damages from both sides. It's really hard, but it matters. If you take things from people with your actions, the only thing we can do, because we're not going to pop their eye out. It's not an eye for an eye. It's not a barbaric society. So we have to put a price on it. And how do you? It's so difficult. But he just kind of just wants to get it over with, is what it felt like to me. He wanted to get this discussion over with because he was uncomfortable asking for money. You can't be uncomfortable asking for money as a plaintiff's lawyer.
lawyers and experts and lots of people here that are making low wages, but a lot of people are making $300, $400, $500 an hour.
What did he say? There are lawyers and experts and whatever that are making low wages? What? But then he says a lot of them are making $300, $400, $500 an hour, which we heard the experts testify to. Now, what's interesting about that? In our jurisdiction in Florida, you cannot use that as a marker. You cannot use what the experts made on the case and apply it to the non-economic damages for plaintiffs. I guess you're allowed to do that here. And it's like you pay them $400 to sit in a chair and talk. The pain and suffering Terry's going through is worth a whole lot more. Nobody would go through what he's going through for $400 an hour or whatever, but at least you give him something to hold on to. And he didn't.
Well, I'm just suggesting a number. You can put in whatever number you want. This is for the non-economic damages that Terry deals with every day. So that's the next number. 16 times 365 times 17. I'm going to suggest a number. You put in the number you think is fair for Terry, the full value of the harms and losses that he's dealing with every day. I'm going to say $33. $33.
And just so you know, I'm going to stop there, but he never actually explains why he picked $33. But for it equals the number that they ended up coming to in closing arguments. And he used the words harm and losses. Harms and losses is kind of buzzwords that we try to talk about to help a jury understand. But you have to explain what that means. You can't just say the words. I always say words are important and definitions are important, especially to lawyers. Because saying harms and losses is one thing, but explaining what the harms and losses Terry's going through is another. And I didn't think they pulled enough out of him on the stand, and they definitely didn't hit enough of it in closing. Okay. So there was a lot of, and then he talked about this King story with eye for an eye and stuff like that, which is fine. So a lot of repetition, also a lot of repetition with Owens. And then this is what he gave the tidbit of him and his client. We've been passing these cute Post-it notes back and forth. She's been a punching bag called King Kong in a hit and run. That's just false. The judge threw that out. He tells the same story about how it was so sad and she was merging families and thinking about her dad. A lot of repetition. But then we get to what I thought was a very well done use. When you get a win and you get a jury instruction that's good for you, don't let it slide. You've won the argument, now use it. And I think he used this spoliation, GoPro, jury instruction, and a couple other ones that he read to his advantage. He drilled them home, and I thought that was a good job by
Will
him.
not help my case. Glad that there's a that night, 6 p.m., so about 6 hours after the collision, she got off the phone with the understanding that he had a GoPro video of the incident and typed to him, I am so glad that there's a GoPro and that you're okay. All right. No one has the GoPro, but I'm telling you this. If you find that there was a GoPro and that he said, that will not help my case, delete. If that happened, you can conclude that it was against him, that it helped us. And wouldn't it have been nice if it had been around? Do you remember when we talked 8-9 days ago?
So here's what I will say. While I did think that was a good job by him to use that, I also think I would have been licking my chops if I was the plaintiff's lawyer, because I knew I had rebuttal coming back. And what I would have said, and the first thing that popped into my head as soon as he said that was, I'd go up there and be like, well, members of the jury, in opening, if you remember back, and here's the other thing. If the judge does not tell me I can't do something that the defense does not want me to do, you better believe I'm going to do it. Let me say that again. If the judge does not, because it's double negative, does not instruct me not to do something, meaning forbid me, if the judge does not forbid me from making an argument that the defense is worried about, you better believe I'm going to make that argument, and here it is. Members of the jury, in opening statement, you heard Mr. Owens say, look at this link right here. This is the best piece of evidence in the case, and guess what? It doesn't exist because the plaintiffs got rid of it. And then what happened, members of the jury, in the middle of trial? What do we get? We get that link, the most important piece of evidence in this case. But it was only the most important piece of evidence when you didn't know what it was, so that Mr. Owens could act like it was good for them. But when we actually got what was on that link, what was it? It was a picture of Whitney Smith. Didn't help either side. It just was a picture. And now the GoPro that everybody said did not exist is, of course, the most important piece of evidence that would be good for Mr. Owens' client, because there's not actual evidence that's good for them. Now, I still think they would have lost, but I'm just saying that would have been my response. At least swing, at least take some shots at him. He was scared of that. He asked the judge to not let you do that, and the judge did not forbid you. So I would have made that argument in rebuttal. They didn't. So then he starts talking about how damages don't matter if he didn't cause the hit. She's correct. Then he starts using some quotes from Jenny, which I think is totally improper and I would have objected to, because that did not come into evidence, and impeachment material is used differently than if testimony came in as evidence, because you can't use that hearsay objection to get it in for impeachment purposes does not make it evidence to prove the truth of the matter that was asserted in that hearsay. But they didn't object, and he used it as if it was evidence. Missed opportunity by the plaintiff's lawyer, in my opinion. Then some more testifying by counsel, but both of them did it. Owens very flippantly says, I hope I'm doing half the things that Terry Sanderson's doing at 75, which again is in direct contrast with what James argues about all the pre-existing conditions and how it was already downhill for him and he couldn't do all this stuff anyways. Whatever, we already went through that in detail. But then he adds to it, heck, both of my parents were dead at 76, with a little almost chuckle. I was like, sheesh, man. No doubt they believe it's over at 76. But at the same time, he's a world traveler, zip lining and white river rafting and all that stuff. He argued that each person can have a percentage of fault or no fault. And Terry wasn't a little guy. He was 180 pounds and pudgy. Half an eye and his hearing was shot. This is argument now. You can be argumentative. And he took full opportunity to do that. Osteoarthritis can make it easier to break ribs. I don't remember anybody testifying to that, but okay. Oh, this was a good point. So Mr. Ramon said he was out for minutes, but he never called 911. He never tried to do anything to help. Good point. Then Egan comes on damages and said Ramon tried to get attention by twisting the story when he heard it was Gwyneth Paltrow and getting attention. I thought that was a really great argument. Health challenges started way before the collision, and he's much better now than he realizes. Thought that was a great, I thought Egan was better. I mean, just point blank, I thought he was better than Owens and than either of the plaintiff's lawyers. Then on rebuttal, plaintiff comes back and makes some arguments that I just did not think were compelling at all. He did say, well, he's old and hurt, but so what? Because he's old. And Mr. Owens' parents died at 76. He didn't say that part. And he also mentioned that it's too bad that the nice things Jenny said didn't come out. It's like, dude, you could have called her too. You could have read the deposition in too. And that was the very anticlimactic closing statements. There was way too much repetition. I thought James had the best connections with the damages arguments. And I was not surprised at all with the verdict in this case. And I thought Terry Sanderson, at the end of the day, did not have nearly enough evidence to prove this case and asked for way too much in damages and gives plaintiffs a bit of a bad name, I think, when you overreach. I can understand why he brought the claim. If Ramon told him this is what happened and he didn't remember it, so I do feel for him there because he is lacking memory. So maybe he is not completely lying, but believing somebody who's telling a lie, which I think is different. I'm interested to hear what happens with the attorney's fees. We'll see if that's live streamed. But it was really interesting. I think this was a really interesting trial. I'm glad you all joined me for it. We're going to get to your questions now for a few minutes, as long as my voice will allow. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll go check after this video. Maybe we'll hit 215,000, which would be fun. Fun way to start the weekend. All right, let's get to some questions and comments. Mandy, you said if the person you win against can't pay, you get nothing. Correct. What if you're awarded attorney's fees and they can't pay? Well, Mandy, I think you just answered your own question. You get nothing. Can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, they say. Shanta, do you think they'll still go for money and that could bankrupt him? I don't know how much it is. I may have a guess, but he can file for bankruptcy. They can decide to go after him. They might not, but the judge still has to make a decision if this is a case worthy of responding with attorney's fees. Yes, she can change her mind as well. She doesn't have to go after them. John, any expectation on lawyer fees? So for Paltrow, I would guess 7 years, and she can get costs as well. It's got to be 7 figures. It's got to be 7 figures. They put a lot of work into this. Joy Puffle, I apologize, just got here. Did they say how long they deliberated for? They didn't say, but it was not very long, especially because I think lunch was mixed in there too. Shorter than Murdoch, which is not surprising. Mo, is it okay to show a completed verdict form in closing that rules in your favor? Seems a little shady to me. Almost every lawyer does it. It is good practice to do. It showed the jury's never filled out a verdict form for the most part. So show them how to fill it out the way you want them to. That's what everybody gets taught. That's what almost everybody does. I think it is best practice to show them what it looks like when you would win. But you cannot like it as a layperson, and some people may be turned off by it. Marjorie, maybe this is discouragement against bringing frivolous lawsuits for fame. I hope so. Anything that can discourage frivolous lawsuits. Also, now that we are going to watch every night, now what are we going to watch every night? Thanks, Peter, for being a welcome respite for mainstream media. I appreciate it. We'll find something. And some videos will be posted during the day too, and you can still watch them at night. Taco, she should have sued him for a taco. Suzanne, love her, always have the right verdict. She was respectful at the reading of the verdict. That is a lady of grace. Jocelyn, when will it be decided if he pays her legal fees? At a hearing at a later date. So if anybody sees that, shoot it to me on Twitter or Instagram at Tragos Law, and we'll definitely do a video on that. Absolutely. Tori, Peter, do you always pack up the setup when you go on trips, always thinking you might want to talk to us? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is all just basically done with my work computer here. John, both parties walking through the paperwork seemed weird. Thoughts? Very common. Very, very common. Peggy, can we meet John? Yes, he was actually on a members only live stream. I think it was 2 months ago, where where he came on. It was pretty cool. And a lot of people had a lot of questions for him, talking about the setup and how we do things, how we edit, how we set up the lights, mics, camera phones, microphones, why we use certain things. Tori, does TS have any kind of insurance he's paying his lawyers like AH? I mean, his prosecution seemed expensive. I have no idea. Most of the time, insurance will not cover you prosecuting a case, prosecuting meaning on the plaintiff's side, bringing the case, but maybe the defense of her counterclaim. Faith did some math for me. 8 hours a day for 6 months, $100 an hour, $144,000. That seems reasonable to me. May seem high to you guys, but if he would have won for the rib fractures, that seems reasonable. Then the concussion you add on top of that, and you get into the range. I kind of thought if he would have won, 250 to 300 would have been a good range, in my opinion, for this case. Jesse Sue, I don't even make $33 an hour working my butt off each day. I need to hunt down a celebrity on the slopes, apparently. I'm glad you made this comment, Jesse, because I will tell you that we think about this and we understand. People on that jury are going to be people that are unemployed, people that make minimum wage, sometimes people that make a lot of money, and then most people somewhere in between. And we think about that. How many of these people have ever thought the number's $3.2 million? How many people have ever made 3.2 or will ever make it in their lifetime or know anybody that makes $3.2 million? So in order to get to numbers like that, if you really truly believe that that is the damage done to your client, you have to prove it to them. You have to make it known to them what your client is going through so that you say, Jesse, I work really hard and I make $25 an hour or whatever it is. I would never want to go through what they're going through. It's way worse than 5 times as much or 4 times as much as my job, which is $100 an hour. That's how you get to those numbers. But if you don't convince them that it's even that bad, they have the thought you have right here, and we know that. Devin's Law. Damages is what I spend the most of my time in voir dire on. Absolutely. Caps on damages. How damage affects everyday life and the price of milk. How these verdicts affect insurance premiums. Absolutely. A ton of time. This is how you win the case. It's picking the jury, the most important part. Ashley, do you think TS will have to pay attorney's fees? I don't think so. I think the fact that he has memory loss and that there was an independent witness that told him she ran into his back and experts that said it, if the burden is he brought this in bad faith, I don't think so. But I could be wrong. 100% to 0 is a pretty big telling sign and a quick verdict. Robin, jury was warned of his off-putting personality. This didn't show when he testified. What do you think their plan was? Why and when do you think it changed? I'm not sure what you mean, but I definitely think the verdict timing and percentages show the jury just did not buy it. How does this case make you feel as a PI lawyer? It makes me feel good because it makes me feel like when I have some tough conversations with my client about the value of their cases. Now, some clients, we've had plenty of clients whose cases are worth $3 million and more, but this was not one of them. If you are able to do everything that Terry Sanderson was able to do post-accident, it did not change your life to the tune of $3 million, especially if you're not asking for medical bills. It would have been one thing if you had $500,000 in medical bills. So it makes me feel good about that. It makes me feel good about understanding that it is about who the jury believes. And I think the right decision was made in this case, how the case was presented. We as the plaintiff's lawyers have to hold our burden. Manage client expectations is really, really important. Azam, is that kind of calculation by the plaintiff's lawyer common in civil cases, Peter? Yes, incredibly common, but you have to explain it better than they did. This to me, I don't think I don't want to like offend anybody. I don't think he's done a lot of this. I don't think he's done a lot of damages arguments. Lisa, I think Owen's got some good stuff in his closing. I agree. Love that he talked about her sitting there for 2 weeks. Absolutely. And she could have just paid it to go away. Wonder if he's been listening to us. I also liked how he was like, are you sure you want to do this? You could have thrown money at it. You have to sit here for 2 weeks. You can't use your cell phone. And she said, yes. Again, facts not in evidence. I would have absolutely objected to that. Is he waiving attorney-client privilege, right? But I thought that was very effective. I'm glad you brought that up. I had it in my notes. I must have missed it. Paula, has GP commented on the verdict yet? I haven't seen it. If she does, or if Owens does, send it to me on Instagram and Twitter. And I am going to do another follow-up video to this next week, as we always do when stuff starts trickling out about reactions to the verdict. Off topic, can we have an Uhtred movie recap chat? Ooh, maybe that'll be the April members only, if enough members are interested in, of course. I'd be down. Diamonds and doggies. Peter, can a witness refuse a subpoena, or do you have to go testify by law? You have to go testify. We've seen a case where somebody showed up in an orange jumpsuit. Shanta, Sarah Boone starts April 10th. Please cover it. 100%. I'm all in on this case. I'm actually going to go to court for some days of this case. I haven't heard yet. I think it's going to get continued again. I hope it doesn't, but we'll see. Brenda, can GP go for like properties, et cetera, or like a judgment? I don't know the homestead laws in these states. If it's homesteaded and protected, no. But if he's got some like rental properties or unprotected properties, yes, she could. I found this trial inspiring. A-list actress, but we ended up focused on the facts. GP showed humility in the end. Yay for democracy. I agree. I think we learned a lot. Tevin's Law, I'm lucky. I try cases in the richest county in the U.S. I hear you, man. There are some counties are much better than others here in Florida. Velda, I seen that Sarah Boone sent another letter to her lawyer and copied the judge. Yes, some of you sent that to me on Twitter. I'm not going to do any videos this weekend. I'm going to give my voice a rest. I need a break. But I do have a video posting tomorrow that I've already recorded, so have no fear. But I am going to get to this next week for sure. Mr. RN, if I get a subpoena, does the legal team pay my expenses and lodging? Only in certain circumstances. Probably not. Probably going to have to show up. Now, if it's like across the country and you can show a legitimate hardship, you can probably get out of it. It all depends, and it's really a case-by-case basis. Caroline, lurking since Depp, chat should be called Lawyer You Know Family. I like that. Jung Mim Shelley, please do a review of Wisconsin versus Zachary Anderson trial. The lack of evidence is unreal. Team up with law and lumber. Speaking of law and lumber, unpopular opinion. Tons of nasty comments on this case. This trial gave an 8-day view of 76 years of someone's life, which is supposed to be focused on this case. No winners in litigation, only one who lost, less than the opponent. We all live in glass houses, which is why your attorney should fight to keep the irrelevant information out and only allow relevant information in. And if it happens like this, you better appeal anything that was irrelevant that came in that could have affected the jury's opinion. Thank you, Rob. We got to do a stream together soon. Any golf stuff happening? I'm golfing tomorrow. Sue, GP commented on Instagram. Interesting. I will add that to the video for next week. P-Hop, but the most important thing, do we have 7,000 likes? Do we? Do you love me? Could you learn to love me? Stephanie Coker, when I first heard a vet got a TBI by a careless celeb and his life was altered, I was symptomatic. But when DTRS only said one time he got lost, one time he couldn't tie a knot, and one time he yelled at his grandchild, that didn't add up to me, especially when he was able to travel the world. Amanda Moore, unfortunately for us, wanting the law aspects, it would be hard for much of LawTube to cover Trump. The polarizing nature is beyond. I don't think there are enough mods in the world to keep the chat sane. I've tried to do some of this in the past. It does not go well. I mean, look at this case. People were mad if I said something good about Terry Sanderson. They were mad if I said something good about Gwyneth Paltrow. Imagine how I would say something good or bad about Trump, and I assume there'd be both. People would get mad. It ain't happening on this channel. I'm sorry. I love you guys, but I don't want to have that fight. Melanie, I wonder if all the GP haters know she was stalked for 10 years and 2 trials. He was mentally incompetent and no jail would understand. Interesting. Thank you to the new members, Laura, Katie Q, and Christina, and Jane. How cool. Off topic. Do your clients send gift ever case wins? Sometimes they do. A lot of times they do. It's really nice. If yes, ideas. My attorneys took my case on contingency, and I'm so appreciative. They made a good amount. I mean, they send all sorts of stuff. A shirt, something they make, like a carved out of wood, something to hang on the wall, edible arrangements they've sent, gift cards, all sorts of stuff. But anything, even just a thank you note, is really nice to get. All right. My voice is out, so I'm going to have to call it. I appreciate everybody joining me. This is awesome. D-Lo, TS on the stand on cross reminded me of my 6-year-old getting caught with his hands in the cookie jar. P.S. I like tacos. Okay, a couple more, and then I'm out of here. Yes, The Last Kingdom Uhtred movie recap, please. Thank a farmer. And Lisa, thanks for all the great coverage on this. It is way more interesting than I thought it would be. Can't wait for the next one. I heard Crumbly lost their appeal. Yes, they did. Very interesting. So we'll be following that one as well. All right, I'm out of here. I love you all. Yes, golf tomorrow. Say a prayer. I go low, baby. Is your sub number closer to 215? I'll make a post on Instagram and on the community page if it hits 215 by the end of the night tonight. So you guys have a great weekend. I appreciate everyone. Take a listen to the outro. And if you don't know what I do for a living, how I might be able to help you, now you know. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury,